Item number 12 is the Value for Money programme and the observations from the Independent Reference Panel. And if I could invite Miriam Dean, the chair of the Independent Reference Panel, to come forward. Miriam, thank you for being with us today. I'll move the motion. I think Councillor Simpson, you'd probably like to second that one. At Performance Review and Value for Money Committee, we had an initial report from Miriam as the chair, and I thought that the substance of what she had to tell us was sufficiently important that we should bring this back to the governing body. So welcome along, Miriam. Can I begin by thanking you and Doug Martin and John Lucas for your collective role as the Independent Reference Panel. It's been so important for us to have people outside the organisation to be that check to ensure that what we were doing was thorough and appropriate. That gave confidence to us, but just as importantly, it gave confidence to the wider public that this is not an exercise that's about words. This is an exercise about making real, hard savings that enable us to deliver better for our constituents. So thank you so much for that work, and I now invite you to speak to us.
Morena, and thank you for the opportunity to attend. I will take it that the paper's been read, but perhaps if I just summarise a few key points. I think the first one, at the very high level, is that the independent panel's perspective is that this program has proved very, very worthwhile, and it would certainly be our recommendation to Council that it continue. I think, secondly, why that's partly so is because we've been really careful to take a wider strategic perspective and looking at what value means. It's not just about cost savings, they're an important part, but it's taking that very strategic view, looking at is Council delivering value for services, and by Council I'm referring to that whole family of the Council group, including the CCOs. My second point is that that has definitely delivered benefits, and I've simply noted them in our short paper, but it has led to lower costs. We've already achieved $270 million savings in the 2 years we've been going. The 3 waters and procurement reviews made a particularly strong contribution to that. We've definitely, picking up the comment that one of the councillors just made a moment ago, been able to help, I believe, break silo thinking down in many areas of Council's operations, including across the CCOs. And again, a notable example of that was the increased cooperation as a result of our review between Healthy Waters and Watercare. So some of our reviews, I do genuinely believe, have been a real catalyst for promoting better working relationships within the Council family. More synergies. The reviews have definitely helped eliminate duplication of activities, encourage more sharing of resources and information, and the procurement review, we think, was a stellar example of that. We're very conscious of not just looking for the weaknesses, but also celebrating successes, and the one that I personally am very fond of is the terrific job our Auckland Council libraries are doing and the excellent customer satisfaction. So we really made a focus of that in our customer service review, and of course we can learn lessons from what is it that the libraries are doing that we can take across to other areas where Council is perhaps doing less well in its customer satisfaction, like regulatory services. Our reviews enable us to share insights. One review often provides insights for us in another. And then perhaps one of the last points, and one I do feel quite passionate about, is that encouraging more trust and confidence in these days is so important in our institutions. And I do firmly believe it's vital the Council can show, as you are through this program, that you are prepared to evaluate whether your services are giving ratepayers the best value for money, and they can have trust and confidence in that process. So those are really the benefits. As to process, again, Council can be proud, I believe, that this is no mere box-ticking exercise. We adopt a very fact-based approach, And again, one of the benefits of these reviews is we take the same process across all reviews so that they are not ad hoc. We engage external expertise, we have an independent panel, and I do believe that independence, again, helps encourage greater trust and confidence in the process. We've also looked at ourselves. We've made a number of improvements along the way to the way we deliver this program. One possible improvement for the future, I've noted in our short report, is the panel for itself does believe that the council is missing an opportunity actually to tell ratepayers simply and clearly what you are doing in terms of a methodology to give ratepayers best value for money. So those are my very brief high-level observations. I do hope they're helpful to the council.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Miriam. I reflect that around this table we have quite strong debates around sums of money considerably smaller than the savings that we've made through this process. And a minor issue will sometimes achieve a headline. I don't think the value for money exercise has ever achieved a headline or actually even much coverage in the media. And I think I'd certainly take on board your comment that, that this is a message that we need out there in order to actually support trust and confidence in the council. Out in the wider public, I think there is a high level of cynicism. And people say, why don't you open the books? Well, that's exactly what you have been doing and what we have been doing by inviting you in as an external reference group to say, okay, what you're doing is right and proper and these are areas where you need improvement. And I think we're going to have to focus much more on the recommendation you've just made to us about getting the message out there about where we've made those savings and I think just as importantly where those savings go. Because I think the figure you used already achieved $270 million. Wow, that is absolutely huge. That is huge, and that sort of saving ought to be something that we can convey through whatever channels to the public. Anyway, that's my introductory comment. Councillor Simpson, would you, have you any questions or comments you'd like to make? I think if we run questions and comments together in this session, Councillor Walker following that.
So I've got a question. I've got a question as it goes to some specific projects and some examples. So recently, for example, we've had the sale of the Civic Administration building, which arguably is worth $100 million. Let's say $50 to $60 million for land, $40 million for the building for $3 million. Without a circumstance where Panuku came back to us against a background where we were achieving a fire sale price. So I just want to raise that issue as one example. Secondly, same organisation proposing to sell waterfront land at West Park Marina that could arguably accommodate up to 600
Councillor, Councillor, excuse me, I really have to intervene at this point. This is not part of the brief that Miriam Dean's group has had. The questions you're raising are political. I'd be very happy to respond to all of them now, but I won't. I think we need to focus on what the independent reference group is here to report on, please.
So the assumption I'm making is that this review applies over council-controlled organisations, is that correct?
As part of those reviews that come before us, Councillor, yes, but only as part of the particular reviews we've had in the last 2 years, and the matters you've raised were certainly not part of any review that's been before us.
So is it possible for your review process to accommodate issues as they arise, particularly where they are matters of huge substance in terms of the amount of money involved? How can we achieve that?
I'm going to ask Kevin Ramsey to address that question, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, key to point out here is the nature of these reviews are systemic reviews about the strategic approaches to how we're effectively delivering services. It doesn't delve into any individual transaction, and the ones you've raised, as the Mayor has stated, those are political decisions made around this table for valid reasons, and the business cases were put up. So the nature of the reviews that we actually ask the independent reference panel to look at a functional area, the services it provides, how is that being affected? How is it being effectively delivered from the governance perspective? How is it funded? And what are the mechanisms to deliver it? It doesn't delve down into any individual transaction, because that's not the nature of the review, and that'll be way too extensive a review to undertake in the timeframes we have here. We have operational factors within the organisation to do that. We have expertise, we have internal audit processes that actually manage individual transactions and do that very effectively.
Could I just add, as the lawyer here, these reviews are actually done pursuant to Section 17A of the Local Government Act, so we have to stay within a statutory process, though that statutory process relates to looking at value re-services.
Yep.
So we are very much tied to a statutory program.
Thank you for highlighting that. The other issue is a political issue, and it has been addressed separately before this governing body, and full information has been given, which is contradictory to some of the information that is in the public arena. So I want to focus on what this group has been doing for council in terms of our questions and comments, please.
I have another question.
Right, could you please make this one relevant to the topic before us?
In respect of service delivery and value for money, are we looking at the option of service delivery on the part of a council-controlled organisation being brought in-house to, say, council? So a circumstance, let's say, where the operation of the stadiums under RFA was brought under Parks in council as compared to RFA, and obviously that would run with the independent review of the cultural assets of RFA.
We have the question, I think. Kevin Ramsey.
Yeah, so as each service is reviewed, one of the considerations, as Miriam Dean has pointed out, is 17A, and 17A requires you to look at how that has been delivered, the model set up, whether that's through a CCO, through collaboration, amalgamation. So those options can be considered, yes. Pinning all of that is actually the strategies of council, and if the council has determined that we have a group structure and these services are delivered through a certain organisation, that becomes the bedrock that the review will be founded around. But yeah, it does have the opportunity to look at some options, as far as whether those particular operating models may be more effective in the delivery of the service for the particular review that the independent reference panel has been asked to look at.
And one further question. It doesn't appear to be working, it is now. In respect of, let's say, an organisation like Panuku, which is providing service across asset development, does our brief, our parameters, offer the possibility to look at options where, let's say, a government agency like HLC, which has morphed into something different, might be able to provide that service for us and perhaps access more debt than we're able to? So are we able to look outside the organisation in terms of service delivery?
We've had the question, thank you. I think that's the question, Kevin, that you would address rather than Miriam.
Okay, yes, thank you, through the Mayor. What you're really talking about now is an entity review, which is part of a CCO type review, as far as what responsibilities and mandates have been passed on to the various entities that make up the group. What the 17A reviews for the Value for Money program do is look at these services. So it's actually looking at the provision of a service and how's that being delivered. What you're now talking about is actually the purpose and responsibilities of an entity. That's beyond the scope of a Value for Money review. That's more of a CCO review type situation.
Thank you, and I've foreshadowed that should I be part of the next council and have the support of council, that review will take place. Next question, Councillor Newman.
Thank you. Good morning. It's interesting. I've had a read of the report, but I just wanted to get some clarification because I'd like to get some information about the 17A review in the park space. So we're talking about a systemic review about strategic decisions pertaining to services provided. We did a major review in the parks area. It came back with some very, very courageous recommendations about asset recycling and divestment. What's happened to that? Because I can't see that in the schedule. Is that up to the benefit realisation stage, or is it a bit?
No, but I think Ross is best to, or Kevin to speak to that.
Sorry to monopolise the conversation here, Miriam. The Parks has been gone through a review process. There's been evidential base built up around how actually the service has been delivered, and as you say, there were some draft recommendations pulled together. To a certain extent, as with all of our reviews, other processes come alongside and all of them overlap. What we have is a governance framework review also occurring, which is talking at a more fundamental level around the decision-making rights around some of our local activities. And so that really has to get bedded down first before we can then pick up the Parks review. Because as I mentioned before, the value for money reviews are around services, and what they're really saying is for the strategies, the policies, the mandates, responsibilities that you've actually adopted in this organisation, are we now effectively delivering things? So until you determine things such as decision-making rights, the Parks one is sort of on hold, and that will then follow that process.
Is that the only review that's on hold? Because that seems to be the only review that doesn't pop up here that I can, or are there other reviews that have gone on hold?
Yeah, look, through the chair, look, you are right. It's the only one on hold because if you remember, going back around about 6 months, we actually talked about the emphasis focusing on the more corporate back office type functions, and so all of the reviews that have happened subsequently that are to do with the back office. It's been, the legal and risk. It's been the human resources underway right now. It's been the corporate property potentially starting next. So there've been more of the corporate back office type functions where we can actually work collaboratively across the group.
But wouldn't it be the case that actually the Parks review was undertaken because the recommendation was to undertake it and it was part of the schedule, and so the timing wasn't irregular? So we did actually mandate a review in the Parks space, and it's come back with recommendations which are not being addressed because for whatever reason.
Yep, you are right. It was on the original schedule, but as I say, other things happen in the organisation have really surpassed that. So it still will be reviewed. It is just making sure that we actually do it when we can build it on top of the right decision-making process. The last thing we want to do is put up recommendations for a Parks review that then sort of undermines what the decision-making process is you'd like to determine. And so that governance framework review really has to precede it.
So what
It will still occur.
What were the errors in the Parks 17A review? It isn't reported here, but there must have been errors if you haven't reported it.
Through the mere errors, no. There were no errors. That reached draft recommendation stage is what we believe is appropriate. We now need to reassess whether those draft recommendations would change if the fundamental decision-making process changed.
Well, what would be the change to the fundamental decision-making process? I mean, part of those draft recommendations was they absolutely aligned with the terms of reference of the 17A review. It's just that it seems to me that they were just too unpalatable to present.
Without belabouring the point, you need to determine fundamental structures, responsibilities, who has authority to make decisions before you actually put a process of delivery around that. So, for instance, in the same case we just mentioned earlier on, if there's a CCO review and the mandate has changed as to responsibilities, we would then have to make sure that how those services have been delivered meet the new requirements, the new model that's underpinning it. So that's what it comes down to now. So this, just to re-emphasise the point, no errors, but there were draft recommendations which we'd like to sit and reassess when other decisions are made.
What's the time frame for that?
That will depend on the governance framework reviews and other things and any other CCO structures or anything that comes through. But look, we anticipate that to be quite early in the new term. There's not a lot more work to do as far as the evidential base goes. The information's there. What best practice can look like is still there. It is purely fitting it into what this organisation best needs.
I think that will be a decision for the incoming council. What I would like to note here, and it refers back to a comment, Miriam, you made to the Value for Money Committee, is that we have had a more thoroughgoing review of value for money than any other local government entity in the country. And we have not reached the end of that process. It will be a circular process where we will keep searching out for savings that can appropriately be made without damaging the services that we should properly be deciding. And in the case of the Parks issue, I don't think there was any appetite around the table by any councillor to want to sell off pieces of parks. That was the political view around the table, and I stand by that. And far from selling off bits of park, everybody knows we've added hundreds and hundreds of hectares of new public open space, parks and reserves, and we should be proud of that. Okay, further questions, comments? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Miriam, I just wanted to know, do you think Section 17A is still the appropriate legal framework to carry out this work that we're doing?
Well, it is required by the Local Government Act. It's quite a broad framework, so I guess my response as a lawyer, it works. I think what we have done, and I think the council can take pride in this, from what I understand, our program has certainly been, as the Mayor has said, it's been more thorough, it's been more sort of integrated, taken a really strategic perspective. What we've been really careful not to do is just do a tick the box, which does not deliver value to ratepayers. So in short, I think the Section 78 process works well, particularly if you approach it in a way where you really are getting to the fundamental purpose of it, which is to look at services, are they being delivered with value for money for ratepayers? And that's really been our mantra and why we perhaps have done it a little bit differently.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll put Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the savings we have to date is 90 million per year, and we're forecasting another 430 million per year over the next 10 years. That's sort of roughly half. So is that to do with adding to that with the further work streams in the next terms on that 10-year program, or is it going to be additional work to top it up? Or is it just getting
It's just the benefits that haven't yet been realised. The 270 million have already been delivered.
Yes.
Of the 470, there's still work for those particular entities within the council to implement our recommendations and hopefully deliver what is close to, I think, $500 million, is it?
$500 million.
Obviously, we're hoping that with the further reviews we get, subject to council deciding to continue with these value for money reviews, then the savings will be higher.
That's, I think, a very valuable point. This is not the end figure. This is a start figure. There's further work to be done by this panel going forward on a newly identified work stream. My last question is, I presume you'll have a strong input into what that work stream is going to look like in the next term.
I think it'd be fair to say generally we are given the work streams. I mean, obviously we do have some input, but we're very much reliant on our team to put before us what are the next appropriate value for money reviews. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. It's been interesting being on the committee that has overseen this work in this term, and I suppose I've been pleased to see this work, which was commenced as a requirement, a statutory requirement, under Len Brown and our CEO Stephen Town. So moving forward, and you are. What you're saying is it's really, in a way, it's getting the right attitude and headspace to be able to address these. Can you give me some guidance on, as elected members, the overview that we want to see, where you would have us begin to prioritise those extra? I mean, there's democracy services, and I understand that you're beginning to look at some work programs around that. What the Mayor is clarifying is the need not to lose those services that are near and dear to the community, but that for the provision, the actual services themselves, they are being delivered in the best possible way. Can you give us some guidance for the next term, building on the work that's already in the last term, this term, and we thank Stephen Town for his oversight of that as a requirement of his contract to the council. What would your recommendations be to us to take it to the next stage next term and to prioritise the work that we wish to have evaluated?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a tentative program of reviews already set down for the next term, assuming the program continues. I have to say I cannot remember off the top of my head the list we've got. Kevin, you can probably speak to that.
Ross will know it off the top of his head.
In fact, I see the former mayor walking in now, where I've just been praising him on commencing this process. But Ross, if you could.
Yeah, I suppose I can tell you about the forward programme, but I think before that is after we had the APR BFM committee, the resolution there was to prepare a briefing for the incoming council, which we are working on. And part of that paper, we believe there has to be more early political engagement in the actual shaping of what the reviews will be. And then that was one of the sort of the findings when we did that reporting back. So, yes, there's a plan set in place because we've developed a plan, but actually I think a key part is actually that briefing to incoming council, and then actually how political leadership will play into that, particularly, if decision rights between governing body and local boards is another thing we're cognizant of in future reviews.
I won't labour this meeting with it, but thank you for that. And it would be important that members of the governing body today, and for those who come in the next term, are aware of that work programme and can support it. So it's not just officer-led, it's elected members-led.
Thank you. Councillor Penny-Hulse.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I just want to correct Councillor Fletcher's point that she made, and I'm afraid she is incorrect. I remember very clearly your initiating of the 17A review. It was probably, I was going to use a very West Auckland word for the fact that you and I had a bit of a shit fight over that.
I was hoping you weren't going to use your West
And I'm
Auckland
going to, because I
Too
can,
late.
because it's my last meeting. But you and I, it was actually well publicised, and I think picked up by some of the media that are here. And it's lovely, Councillor Fletcher, that you are acknowledging Mayor Len, who's just arrived. But Len and I did not initiate this. This was one of the planks for Phil Goff. It was around money saving, and the 17A review was very much part of it. I think it started off as a pretty ropey process. I wasn't too impressed and too supportive, but I think it's moved into a very well considered, highly thoughtful and effective process, and led with external experience and goodwill, and I think we've ended up with these monumental savings as a result. So I think we just need to clear the record on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And to finish, Councillor Desley Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, thanks to you, Miriam. You've led a team of key professionals dealing with an issue that I think all Aucklanders ask is, does this council deliver value for money? Making council more efficient should be something every person sitting around this table wants to achieve. But this report and your report and the associated report done by Ross and Kevin doesn't just say what we could do, it actually says what we have achieved. So, and it's this third term of council that actually has delivered and achieved significant savings. Whilst the former government added this extra piece of legislation to the Local Government Act 17A, we have gone over and above what that simple piece of legislation says in putting your team together and delivering the 8 outcomes so far. And we've done that to the tune of 270 billion. And it's a number that kind of rolls off your tongue, doesn't it? But it's well in excess of $250 million for a start. And I sort of went to the finance team and I said, look, if you're going to try and sell this message to Aucklanders, give me something tangible. Well, it's obviously it's a 16% rates rise, 270 million. It's equivalent to, building 300 new playgrounds, 70 kilometres of cycle lanes, or 300 electric buses. It's a lot of efficiency. Your Worship, I want to acknowledge you because, yes, I want to put this on straight and narrow too. You took up this new legislation and you had doubters. And I wasn't going to mention too much about that, but yeah, you did have some doubters. You had people who thought it was just going to be a slash and burn exercise, and of course it's not. It's not about slashing and burning. It's about being more efficient. And that's what we can honestly say we have been, a lot more efficient. But Your Worship, you didn't give up. You didn't get up when some of the crew around this table said don't do it. You hung on to it, you stuck in there, and you put it under a committee that you already chaired, and I hugely commend you for that. If I've got one fault in the process, it's that we don't sell the good news well enough. And I think we've got to do better at that. And I think you've acknowledged that in your report as well. It's not about you, by the way. I also, that's a collective thing that I think council has to do, and we have to work better with the media around that as well. Kevin and Ross, I want to acknowledge you. You've done an outstanding job. This is tough. Not only is it tough to work with an independent group, but with the politicians as well, and get that balance between that independence and the political will to do things. But I just also want to touch, people talk about savings. Actually, the 217 million is efficiencies. There is savings on top of that 270 million. And in fact, if you're talking savings, let's just remind ourselves that the savings targets we have set for our first 3 years of the LTP are tens of millions of dollars higher than the last term's council's savings. So let's just remember that we've got efficiencies, we've built up, and we've got extra savings. So from my perspective, look, I've championed this work and I've been very proud to be part of that. And whoever is around this table next term, I hope absolutely will put their hands up to be part of this, because it's really important that every councillor and the mayor can prove to the communities and residents of Auckland that we actually do deliver value for money, and we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simpson, and your supporter in the audience. I do want to acknowledge the work that Desley Simpson has done on this. It's been one of her passions on the council, and I do want to acknowledge that this hasn't been slash and burn. I've seen lots of slash and burn at central government, some of it very counterproductive. This is an intelligent way of approaching what we're doing and constantly re-examining how we can do it better to better serve the people that elect us around this table. And I've already thanked you, Miriam, and your group. And it's important that you are there, because this cannot be seen simply as an exercise by council examining how well it's performing and coming out with an A+. It is really important to have people with strong private sector backgrounds to look externally in at what we're doing, to have reference to external experts, which we've drawn into this process as well, so that we have real confidence that this is not a tick-the-box exercise. This is not a once over lightly and will this make us look good. This is about, as Councillor Simpson, you emphasised, $250 million savings, more than that, already banked, and more to come. And I think the total figure from our workshop earlier this year was that the savings from efficiency and doing things better will be approximately $1 billion in this in the 10-year budget that we looked at under the long-term plan. And it's really important that we do that, and it's just as important that we communicate it, and I want to thank you for that. I want finally, actually, Ross, to thank you and Kevin and the team. I have had absolute confidence in the professionalism and the actual passion that you have shown for it. This was not, well, this is an exercise we have to go through. You have gone through that. You have reported to us fully and thoroughly. You've drawn on the expertise that you needed, and we can be really proud of what the council team has done in that regard. So thank you for that. Miriam, once again, thank you for the role that you've played. I know that you've got to be gone fairly soon, and we have 2 more short items to do before we reach the valedictories. But to all of you here, thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Right.
Ngā mihi.
Well done. Yeah.